Juggling for mental wellness. Okay, I got to admit, when I first saw this topic, I was like, really? Is that a thing?
It does sound a little out there, right?
It does. But we've got these sources from a juggling coach named Kevin, and he seems to really believe in juggling's power to help with anxiety, depression, PTSD even.
Wow, that's quite a range.
It is, right?
Yeah.
He's got one piece focusing on those mental health challenges and then another that dives into the more general, like, physical and mental benefits of juggling.
So a bit of a mind-body approach.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you say? Should we unpack this together and see if juggling really lives up to the hype?
Sounds good to me. I'm always up for exploring alternative approaches to well-being.
Well, Kevin starts off with a pretty, I guess, sobering statistic. 40 million people in the U.S. alone struggle with anxiety disorders.
Yeah, that's a significant number. It really underscores the need for, diverse coping mechanisms.
Definitely. And Kevin seems particularly concerned about the potential downsides of relying solely on medication for anxiety.
Right, because there can be side effects.
He mentions things like sleep disruption, decreased libido, jitteriness, and even increased appetite as possible side effects.
Yeah, it's definitely important to weigh the potential benefits against the risks and explore, all available options.
Absolutely. But then he throws out this idea that juggling could be like a DIY version of EMDR therapy.
Okay, now that's where it gets interesting.
Right. So for our listener who might not be familiar, EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Yeah, I've heard of that. It's a type of therapy often used for trauma.
Exactly. And it involves these rhythmic eye movements, like kind of watching a pendulum swing back and forth.
I think I've seen videos of that. It's pretty fascinating how it works.
Right. And what's interesting is that EMDR seems to work by engaging both sides of the brain.
Sort of like a bilateral stimulation.
Exactly. And Kevin's drawing a parallel to juggling because it also involves, coordinating both sides of your body and, by extension, both sides of your brain.
Okay, I'm starting to see where he's going with this. It's like the juggling pattern is creating a similar kind of bilateral stimulation in the brain.
Right, right. Which might explain why some people find it so therapeutic.
Yeah, it's kind of like creating a sense of rhythm and balance, not just physically, but mentally as well.
Exactly. And he even cites a study that found a link between juggling and increased gray matter in a part of the brain called the mid-temporal lobe.
Wait, so is he saying juggling actually makes your brain bigger?
Not exactly bigger, but it might lead to like increased density and connections in this particular area, potentially improving those functions.
Interesting. So it's not just a fun activity, it could actually be changing the structure of our brains.
It seems that way. Now, it's important to note that this is just one study. We need more research to confirm these findings, but it's a pretty intriguing piece of the puzzle, wouldn't you say?
That definitely adds some scientific weight to Kevin's claims.
And he also talks about how juggling has helped him personally get through some tough times.
Right.
He calls it a mind-body workout, which I thought was a pretty good way to describe it.
I like that phrase, too. It really captures that idea that juggling isn't just about physical activity, it's also engaging your mind.
Right, like you're focusing on multiple objects, tracking their movements, anticipating where they'll land, and making those split-second adjustments.
It's almost like a form of, like, mindfulness meditation in a way, where you're really training your attention.
Totally. No wonder people find it relaxing.
And on top of that, you're building hand-eye coordination, dexterity, timing skills that can benefit you in, other areas of life too.
It really is a workout for both your body and your brain. I'm starting to warm up to this whole juggling thing, I have to admit. But let's dive a little deeper into the specific benefits that Kevin lays out, because he seems to be making some pretty bold claims about juggling's ability to reduce stress and anxiety, improve cognitive function, and even boost overall brain health.
He does get quite enthusiastic, doesn't he?
He does. And while his passion is admirable, it's important to remember that, a lot of his claims are based on his personal experience and limited research.
Right. We need more rigorous scientific studies to confirm these effects, especially when it comes to serious mental health conditions like PTSD.
Exactly. So we're not saying juggling is a cure-all or a replacement for professional help, but it might be a valuable tool in the toolkit.
Definitely something to consider adding to the mix. And even if the benefits aren't as dramatic as Kevin suggests, there's no denying that juggling is a fun, accessible activity that can challenge you both physically and mentally.
And that in itself has value. So for our listener who might be thinking, should I just give this juggling thing a try? What would you say?
Honestly, Honestly, why not? It's low cost, low risk, and could potentially have some significant upside. At the very least, you'll learn a new skill and maybe even have some fun along the way.
I'm definitely feeling inspired to give it a shot. Who knows, maybe I'll even discover some hidden juggling talents.
Well, I wouldn't hold my breath on that one, but I'm happy to cheer you on from the sidelines.
Okay, I appreciate the vote of confidence. But before we get too carried away with our juggling dreams, let's take a closer look at the science behind Kevin's claims.
Sounds like a plan. Let's separate the hype from the reality. What stands out to you from the research he cites?
Well, he mentions the study about juggling and gray matter growth, which we touched on earlier. But he also talks about how juggling can improve focus, coordination, and problem-solving skills. I'm curious if there's any evidence to support those claims.
There is some research suggesting that activities that require fine motor skills and hand-eye coordination can have a positive impact on cognitive function. It's not specific to juggling, but it fits with the idea that challenging your brain in new ways can create new neural connections.
So juggling's kind of like a brain workout in a way.
Exactly. And there's also research on the benefits of mindfulness and meditation, which, as we discuss, juggling seems to share some similarities with.
Right, that focused attention, the rhythmic movements.
Yeah, the need to stay present in the moment, all of these elements could contribute to, like a sense of calm and mental clarity.
And I'm guessing that sense of calm could be particularly helpful for people dealing with anxiety or stress.
Absolutely. When you're focused on juggling, you're not dwelling on your worries or anxieties. You're fully engaged in the task at hand.
It's like juggling is a form of active meditation.
That's a great way to put it, and a much more engaging and fun way to practice mindfulness than sitting still with your eyes closed.
I think that's a key point. If something feels like a chore, you're less likely to stick with it. But if it's enjoyable and challenging, it can become a sustainable part of your routine.
And that's where Kevin's enthusiasm for juggling really shines through. He clearly loves it, and that passion is contagious.
It definitely makes me want to give it a try. But before I run out and buy a set of juggling balls, I'd love to hear more about the potential downsides. Are there any risks associated with juggling?
Well, like any physical activity, there's always a risk of injury if you're not careful. You could strain a muscle, drop a ball on your foot, even knock something over if you're not paying attention. But overall, juggling's a pretty safe activity, especially if you start slowly and build up gradually.
And what about the mental health aspect? Are there any situations where juggling might not be a good idea?
That's a good question. I think it's important to remember that juggling is not a substitute for professional help. If you're struggling with a serious mental health condition, it's essential to seek guidance from, a qualified therapist or psychiatrist.
So juggling might be a helpful complementary practice, but it shouldn't be seen as a primary treatment.
Exactly. It's about finding the right tools for the job and not relying on any one approach exclusively.
So we've covered the potential benefits and risks of juggling, the science behind Kevin's claims, and the importance of seeking professional help when needed. But I'm still curious to hear more about the personal side of things. Kevin talks about how juggling has helped him through some tough times, and I'd love to get your take on the psychological and emotional aspects of this activity.
Well, as we've discussed, juggling requires focus, coordination, a certain level of mental discipline.
Right, it's a process of trial and error.
Yeah, of learning from mistakes and persevering even when you feel like giving up. And those are all valuable skills that can translate to other areas of life.
So it's not just about learning to juggle, it's about developing resilience and a growth mindset.
Exactly. And when you finally master a new trick or, achieve a personal best, there's a sense of accomplishment, a sense of satisfaction that can be incredibly empowering.
It's like a tangible representation of your progress, right?
Yeah, you can literally see the results of your effort.
And that can be especially motivating for people who are struggling with low self-esteem or a lack of confidence.
For sure. Juggling provides a platform for setting goals, challenging yourself, and celebrating your achievements, no matter how small they may seem.
It's a reminder that you're capable of learning new things and achieving your goals.
Exactly. And that sense of agency can be incredibly empowering, especially for people who, feel stuck or overwhelmed in other areas of their lives. Juggling gives them a sense of control and mastery.
I'm starting to see how juggling could be more than just a hobby. It could be a tool for personal growth and self-discovery.
It definitely has that potential. And I think that's what makes Kevin's story so inspiring. He's not just a juggling coach. He's a testament to the transformative power of this seemingly simple activity.
And his passion is contagious. I'm seriously considering giving it a try now. I might even challenge you to a juggling duel someday.
I admire your enthusiasm, but I think I'll stick to observing and analyzing from a safe distance. I'm more of a mental juggler, if you will.
I like that. Mental juggling. It's a skill we could all benefit from honing. But speaking of mental juggling, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive already. What are some of the key takeaways for our listeners so far?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that juggling, while seemingly simple, is a surprisingly complex activity.
With a range of potential benefits.
Yeah, both physical and mental. It's not a cure-all, but it could be a valuable tool for improving focus, reducing stress, boosting cognitive function, and even enhancing emotional well-being.
And it's an accessible activity that anyone can try, regardless of age or fitness level.
Exactly. You don't need fancy equipment or a gym membership. All you need is a set of juggling balls and a willingness to learn.
And a healthy dose of patience, I'm guessing.
Definitely. Juggling takes practice and perseverance, but the rewards can be well worth the effort.
Okay, I'm convinced I'm officially adding Learn to Juggle to my to-do list.
Excellent. I'll be cheering you on.
Thanks for the support. Now let's shift gears a bit and delve into one of Kevin's most intriguing claims, the idea that juggling could be a form of DIY EMDR therapy. As we mentioned earlier, EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and it's a type of therapy often used to treat trauma. But how exactly does juggling relate to EMDR? Is there any scientific basis for this claim?
That's a great question, and one that deserves a closer look. As we discussed earlier, EMDR involves rhythmic eye movements that seem to stimulate both sides of the brain.
Right.
This bilateral stimulation has a calming effect and can help people process, difficult emotions and traumatic memories.
So is Kevin saying that the rhythmic movements of juggling are essentially mimicking the eye movements in EMDR?
That seems to be his line of reasoning, and while it's a bold claim, there might be some merit to it. Think about the way you move your arms and hands when you're juggling. It's a very coordinated rhythmic
And
pattern.
engaging both sides of your body.
Exactly, and by extension, both sides of your brain.
So it's like you're creating a similar kind of bilateral stimulation, but through movement rather than eye movement.
Exactly. And remember that study we mentioned earlier about juggling and increased gray matter in the mid-temporal lobe?
Yeah.
Well, that same area of the brain is also thought to play a role in processing emotional responses.
So is it possible that juggling could be stimulating those same neural pathways that are activated during EMDR?
It's certainly a possibility worth exploring. Of course, we need more research to confirm these connections, but the idea that a simple activity like juggling could have such a profound impact on the brain is fascinating.
It definitely challenges our assumptions about what constitutes therapy and what it takes to heal from trauma. But I think it's important to reiterate that we're not suggesting juggling is a replacement for professional help.
Absolutely. If you're struggling with trauma or any other mental health condition, it's crucial to seek guidance from a qualified therapist or psychiatrist. Juggling might be a helpful complementary practice, but it shouldn't be seen as a primary treatment.
That's a really important point. We don't want to give anyone false hope or discourage them from seeking professional help.
Exactly. It's about finding the right balance and using all the tools at our disposal to promote mental and emotional well-being.
Well said. Now let's shift gears a bit and explore another aspect of juggling that Kevin touches on, the idea of flow. He describes juggling as this state of flow where you're fully absorbed in the activity and everything else fades away. What are your thoughts on that?
I think Kevin's onto something there. Flow is this psychological state characterized by complete absorption in an activity. It's often described as this feeling of effortless concentration where you lose track of time and just become fully immersed in the present moment. And juggling, with its rhythmic movements and constant need for focus, seems to lend itself quite well to this state of flow.
So it's like juggling is a form of moving meditation.
Exactly. And the benefits of flow are well documented. It can boost creativity, enhance performance, and promote feelings of joy and fulfillment.
And I'm guessing those feelings of joy and fulfillment could be especially beneficial for people who are struggling with depression or anxiety.
Absolutely. When you're in a state of flow, you're not dwelling on your worries or ruminating on negative thoughts. You're fully engaged in the present moment, which can be incredibly liberating and therapeutic.
It's like juggling is a way to escape the mental chatter and just find a sense of peace and clarity.
That's a great way to put it. And it's a reminder that sometimes the simplest things in life can be the most rewarding.
I'm definitely starting to see juggling in a whole new light. It's not just a circus trick, it's a powerful tool for personal growth, stress management, and even emotional healing.
And I think that's a powerful message to leave our listener with. Sometimes the answers we're looking for are right in front of us, disguised as seemingly mundane activities.
Well said. And speaking of answers, I think it's time for us to take a quick break and then come back to address some of the listener questions we've received about juggling. We'll delve into the practical aspects of learning to juggle, the best resources for beginners, and some tips for staying motivated and overcoming challenges.
So are we ready to tackle some of those listener questions about, actually learning to juggle?
You bet. I think we've sparked some serious curiosity with this deep dive.
Yeah, it's great to see people, open to exploring new things. So first things first, what kind of juggling are we even talking about here?
Right, because there's got to be more to it than just those classic three-ball cascade.
Oh, absolutely. There are tons of variations and patterns. You can go from simple two-ball tosses to these incredibly complex routines.
Really?
Clubs, rings, even torches.
Whoa, hold on. Torches.
Yeah, for the truly adventurous.
Maybe not for me.
Hmm.
I think for the sake of our listeners and myself, we should probably stick with the basics.
Yeah, that's probably wise. Less chance of, setting anything on fire. So let's start with the classic three-ball cascade. Where do you even begin with that?
Right, because, where do you even start?
Well, before you even pick up a ball, Kevin suggests practicing the throwing and catching motion with just one object.
Ah.
He calls it the claw. You hold your hand out, palm up, and imagine you're scooping something up and gently tossing it to your other hand. It's all about getting that smooth, consistent arc.
I'm picturing it now, and it already seems a lot harder than it looks.
Right.
But I can see how mastering that basic motion would be key to building up to multiple objects.
Exactly. And once you've got a good feel for that, Kevin recommends moving on to two balls.
Okay, two balls.
You start by holding one ball in each hand, toss one ball up and slightly across to your other hand. Just as that first ball is reaching its peak, you toss the second ball underneath it. The goal is to have the balls crossing paths in midair.
Okay. I'm already getting flashbacks to my failed attempts at juggling hacky sacks in high school. But maybe with a little more patience and Kevin's guidance, I could actually pull this off.
I have faith in you, and once you've got a good rhythm going with two balls, you're ready for the grand finale, the three-ball cascade.
All right, bring it on. What's the secret to finally conquering those three balls?
Kevin emphasizes it's all about timing and rhythm. Start with two balls in your dominant hand and one in your other hand. Toss one of the balls from your dominant hand up and across, just like you did with the two-ball practice. Then, as that ball reaches its peak, toss the single ball from your other hand underneath it. Finally, just as the second ball is reaching its peak, toss the third ball underneath.
Wow, my brain is already doing backflips just trying to visualize all of that.
It's a lot to coordinate, right?
It is, but it sounds like it boils down to, breaking down the movements into these smaller, manageable steps and then gradually building up.
Exactly. And don't get discouraged if you drop the balls a lot at first. Everyone does. It's part of the process. The key is to be patient with yourself, stay focused, and keep practicing.
Kevin does mention something about visualization and mental rehearsal being helpful. Is there anything to that, or is that just a bunch of, new agey mumbo-jumbo?
Actually, there is some research suggesting that mental rehearsal can improve physical performance. When you visualize yourself performing a task successfully, you're activating those same neural pathways that are involved in the actual physical movement.
Interesting. So picturing myself juggling those three balls like a pro could actually help me get there faster.
It might. It's certainly worth a try. And even if it doesn't, magically turn you into a juggling virtuoso overnight, it can help build confidence and reduce anxiety, which can be, beneficial for learning any new skill.
Okay, I'm definitely going to add some mental juggling practice to my routine. What about those of us who are, shall we say, coordinationally challenged? Are there any tips or tricks for overcoming those physical limitations?
Kevin addresses that too. He suggests starting with lighter objects like scarves or beanbags.
What?
They're easier to catch and control. And he also emphasizes the importance of finding a comfortable stance and posture that allows you to move freely.
So it's not just about brute force and athleticism. It's about finding the right technique.
Exactly, using your body efficiently.
I like it.
And he even recommends practicing in front of a mirror so you can see your form and make adjustments. He says it's amazing what a difference a slight tweak in your posture or hand position can make.
It sounds like he's really thought through every aspect of the learning process.
Yeah.
And anticipated those challenges that beginners might face, what other, like, helpful resources does he recommend?
Well, he highly recommends checking out online juggling tutorials and videos. He says there are some fantastic instructors out there who break down the techniques step by step and offer helpful tips and demonstrations.
Oh, that's great. And I imagine there are also, like, online communities or forums where people can connect with other jugglers.
Absolutely. He emphasizes that connecting with other jugglers, either online or in person, can be incredibly motivating and helpful, especially for beginners.
Right, because you can get support.
Yeah, it's a chance to learn from, more experienced jugglers, share your struggles and triumphs, and just have fun with it.
Yeah, building that sense of community.
Exactly. And he also encourages people to find creative ways to incorporate juggling into their daily routine. Like he suggests, for example, juggling while waiting in line or during commercial breaks, or even setting a goal to practice for 5 minutes every day.
I love that. It's about making juggling a sustainable part of your life, not just this like one-time novelty. And I bet that consistency is key to seeing those, mental and physical benefits we've been discussing.
Absolutely. It's like anything else, the more you practice, the better you'll become, and the more you'll enjoy it.
Okay, I'm feeling inspired. I'm off to order some juggling bowls and find a beginner-friendly tutorial. Wish me luck.
Good luck. I'm excited to hear about your progress, and maybe, just maybe, one day you'll be teaching me how to juggle.
Don't rule it out. You never know what hidden talents might emerge when you step outside your comfort zone. But speaking of stepping outside our comfort zone, we've delved deep into the practical and theoretical aspects of juggling, but we haven't yet addressed the elephant in the room, the skepticism. I think it's fair to say that many people, myself included initially, might scoff at the idea of juggling as a tool for mental wellness. It sounds a bit far-fetched, doesn't it?
I understand the skepticism. It's natural to, question anything that sounds too good to be true. But I think it's important to remember that we're constantly discovering new things about the brain and the mind-body connection. What might have seemed outlandish a few years ago could be widely accepted tomorrow.
That's a good point. We've seen it time and time again with things like meditation and yoga,
Right.
which were once considered like these fringe practices, but are now embraced by mainstream medicine.
Exactly. And I think juggling could be on a similar trajectory. The research is still in its early stages, but the anecdotal evidence is compelling. And when you consider the potential benefits, both physical and mental, it's hard to dismiss juggling as just this, silly party trick.
Right. We're talking about reduced stress and anxiety, improved focus and concentration, enhanced coordination and dexterity, and even potential benefits for emotional regulation and trauma processing. That's a pretty impressive list for something that can be learned in your own backyard.
It is. And I think the key is to approach it with an open mind and a willingness to experiment. You don't have to believe in the hype to give it a try. Just see for yourself how juggling makes you feel.
That's great advice. And who knows, you might just discover a hidden passion for juggling along the way. But before we get too carried away with our juggling evangelism, let's take a moment to acknowledge that not everyone is going to find juggling beneficial or enjoyable. Some people might find it frustrating or even boring, and that's okay. The beauty of exploring, different wellness practices is that there's something out there for everyone.
Absolutely. It's all about finding what works for you and what fits into your lifestyle. Juggling might be a great fit for some people, but for others, it might be something completely different.
Right, like painting or hiking or dancing.
Yeah, playing music, whatever brings you joy and helps you feel more balanced and connected to yourself.
That's a great point. The goal isn't to become a juggling champion. It's to find activities that nourish your mind and body.
And bring you a sense of fulfillment.
Exactly. It's about prioritizing your well-being and finding what makes you feel alive. And sometimes that might involve stepping outside your comfort zone and trying something unexpected,
Like juggling.
like juggling. It's a reminder that life is an adventure, and there's always something new to discover about ourselves and the world around us. And who knows, maybe those discoveries will lead us to, a healthier, happier, more fulfilling life.
Couldn't have said it better myself. But speaking of discoveries, are you ready to tackle some of those listener questions?
Absolutely. Let's see what our audience is curious about. All right, let's jump into some of these listener questions. It looks like we've got a few folks who are intrigued by this whole juggling as therapy idea, but aren't quite sure where to start. One listener asks, what's the best way to find a qualified juggling instructor? Like, are there certifications or anything like that?
That's a great question. It's always wise to, seek guidance from someone experienced, especially when you're starting out. While there isn't like a universal juggling instructor certification, there are reputable juggling organizations and associations that offer, training programs and resources. Kevin mentions the International Jugglers Association, or IJA, is a good place to start. They have a directory of members, many of whom teach, and they also host workshops and conventions.
So checking out the IJA website could be a good first step. Another listener writes, I'm worried I'm just not coordinated enough to juggle. Is there any hope for us klutzy folks?
I love this question. Juggling is often perceived as this like superhuman skill, but the truth is it's more about practice and perseverance than inherent talent. Kevin actually addresses this in one of his pieces, saying that anyone can learn to juggle with the right approach and a bit of patience.
He does talk about starting with lighter objects, like scarves or beanbags, which might be less intimidating for beginners.
Exactly. It's about gradually building up your hand-eye coordination and getting comfortable with those throwing and catching motions before moving on to, heavier objects. And remember, dropping the balls is part of the process. Even professional jugglers drop things from time to time. It's all about embracing those mistakes as learning opportunities.
That's a good reminder for any newsfeel, really. We've got another question here that touches on the mental health aspect.
Mhm.
I'm dealing with some pretty severe anxiety. Could juggling really help with that, or am I better off sticking with traditional therapy?
This is where it gets a bit tricky. While there's growing evidence to suggest that juggling could have positive effects on, you know, mood and anxiety levels, it's important to remember that it's not a substitute for professional help. If you're struggling with a serious mental health condition, seeking guidance from a qualified therapist or psychiatrist should always be your first priority.
Right, Kevin makes it clear that juggling should be seen as a complementary practice, not a replacement for traditional therapy.
Exactly. Think of it as another tool in your toolkit for managing your mental health. And if you're unsure whether juggling is appropriate for your situation, it's always best to, consult with your healthcare provider.
That's sound advice. Okay, one last question that I think a lot of people might be wondering. How long does it realistically take to learn to juggle?
That's the million-dollar question, and unfortunately, there's no easy answer. It depends on a variety of factors, including, your natural aptitude, how much time you're willing to dedicate to practice, and the complexity of the pattern you're trying to learn. Kevin says that some people can pick up the basics of the three-ball cascade in a few hours, while others might take weeks or even months.
Yeah, he emphasizes that it's not a race, it's about enjoying the journey and celebrating those small victories along the way.
Exactly. And even if you never achieve, juggling mastery, the benefits you gain from the process, the improved coordination, the focus, the stress relief, are valuable in their own right.
Well said. So for our listener who is now inspired to give juggling a try, what would be your final piece of advice?
I'd say embrace the challenge, have fun with it, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Juggling is a journey of self-discovery, both physically and mentally. And who knows, you might just surprise yourself with what you're capable of.
And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive into the surprisingly complex and intriguing world of juggling.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you, and I have to admit, you've sparked my curiosity. I might just have to give those juggling balls a try myself.
Well, if a self-proclaimed mental juggler like yourself is willing to give it a go, then there's hope for us all. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time for another fascinating exploration of unexpected connections and hidden knowledge.